first thing I want to say is that some of the ideas that I'm going to be expressing tonight are my personal ideas, and they're not those of the Cooperatives Association necessarily to do my work. And I guess tomorrow's thinking of being a warm-up act. The warm-up act is the one that's not the easy one. Now, I'm going to be using a few words tonight which I guess some people might not like. Words like business and profit. I mean, for some people here tonight, I can imagine they may be negative words. I mean, socialists, for example, who believe that business is the enemy of organised labour, who believe that profit is the surplus extracted from a worker's labour power, and that all the fruit of our collective effort should go to those who do that work. So if anybody does want to, sort of walk out, please do. I won't be offended. So what I want to be talking about tonight is business, cooperative business, and that does mean talking about profit. So if you're looking to reduce income inequality in New Zealand, you should be looking seriously at how cooperatives, member-owned businesses, can help you do this. And I'm going to tell you a very brief 2-minute video, which is, I'll tell you about it afterwards. Go back to the beginning. An interesting video. You start off by thinking it's some kind of great left-wing thing, but it turns out it's a carpet cooperative in the United States, which put that together, and it's trying to get you to shop at your local cooperative store. Now here in New Zealand, as Morris said, a lot of the co-ops or member stores, the members of co-ops wouldn't know they're a member of a particular cooperative. So it's an interesting, it polarises that particular video. I have farmers who say to me that it's the worst thing I've ever seen, and I have store owners who say it's absolutely wonderful, so it's interesting and polarising. Look, during the 18th and 19th century, we can probably all agree, capitalist businesses had few restrictions. Life for people was not good. People responded, many were radicalised. Workers formed unions, some became socialists, communists, anarchists, single taxers, others believed local currency to be the answer to all the world's ills. Many people with a religious sensibility, though, wanted change. Compassionate change, and not necessarily radical change. The creation of the Salvation Army, for example, was one response. And there are a number of similar bodies which haven't survived. We often find that the people who started the early cooperatives had a strong religiosity, a sense of compassion which informed their notion of social justice. So in 1769, A group of weavers in the small Scottish town of Fenwick got together and created a cooperative business to A, bulk buy supplies for their weaving businesses, and B, bulk buy food for their families. This may have been the world's first cooperative business. We don't actually know. That's the oldest one we've got records of. Notice, they were craftspeople, what we would today call self-employed weavers, small business people, what we might term the petty bourgeoisie. They combined, they went into business together so that their primary businesses as weavers could compete against bigger businesses, those perhaps which had newer technology. In 1844, 28 Lancashire men got together and formed the first really successful consumer cooperative, the Rochdale Equitable Pioneers Society. I looked it up today. They include a number of flannel weavers, a silk manufacturer, a shoemaker, a slubber, a clogger, and even included one man who later immigrated to New Zealand. They wanted to provide their families with safe, wholesome food. I mean, at the time, 1844, bread could often have brick dust in it. Flour would contain chalk, and milk was more often than not watered down. 10 years after that, there are 1,000 co-ops across the UK, most of them operating under what we now call the Rochdale Principles. The first New Zealand consumer-owned co-op that we know of was formed in 1844 in Rewacker near Nelson. It didn't last long. The first farmer-owned cooperative was started on the Otago Peninsula, 22nd of August 1871. And I mean, anybody here tonight who was raised in Manawatu will be aware of the co-op. Retail stores owned by the people who shop there. The co-op unfortunately went out of business in 1988. Mark Sainsbury, on Close-Up, recently characterised co-ops as bearded men in sandals bringing rice to the commune. You can find his remarks on our YouTube channel. Lots of people actually think like that. However, as Morris mentioned, the single largest business in New Zealand by a country mile is a cooperative. It's owned by 10,500 dairy farmers, and I'm sure you know I'm referring to Fonterra. Of the 200 largest businesses by revenue, almost 10% are cooperatives of one sort or another. For the year 2011, this country's co-ops employed 43,000 people and had a collective revenue of $39.3 trillion. Now I'm giving you these figures because I want you to take the cooperative business model seriously. All these businesses started small. They all started somewhere. In the US and in the UK, there are some very successful Move Your Money campaigns, which encourage people to shift their bank accounts to credit unions and cooperatives. I quite often ask, who's going to start one here? You need one. So what exactly is a cooperative? And this is how author Edgar Parnell put it, and it's quite a succinct one. A cooperative, he says, is an enterprise, freely established, which is owned and controlled by a group of legal persons for the purpose of equitably providing themselves with mutual benefits, arising from the activities of the enterprise and not primarily from investment in it. Now, what does all that mean? It all sounds quite difficult. It means that you join a co-op to buy something from it or to sell something to it. Now, there are 3 points of difference between a cooperative and the regular kind of business, the investor-owned for-profit business. Number one is the user-owner principle. So the people who own and finance a co-op are those who use it. Principle number two is what we call the user control principle. The people who use the co-op are those who control it. And thirdly, the user benefit principle, which is the purpose of a co-op is to provide and distribute benefits to members on the basis of their use. So, put it simply, you build them, you own them, you control them, you benefit from them. That's essentially how you put it. Now, cooperatives can make unique and even relevant contributions because they are committed to their communities in the long term. They get people involved in managing the business. They promote job creation and retention in the communities they serve. Now, we hadn't cribbed on each other, so we had no idea I had no idea what I was going to say. They strive to be profitable, not as an end in itself, but to effectively meet the needs of current members and future generations. They use a business model that is solid and viable, and they're truly resilient, as the last financial crisis and economic crisis have shown. So cooperatives help families and individuals live more economically enriched lives and can offer an ethical way of doing so. Also, they can help small businesses survive in competition with large businesses, which is what we saw from that there. We don't have Walmart in New Zealand because the 3 foodstuff cooperatives do such a good job of looking after their grocer members. Now, people in Kaikoai, however, are looking to set up a butcher and greengrocer store, which is owned by the consumers as a co-op. Now, can you see something like that working in Wellington region? Yeah, I heard one yes. Good. I think so too. Something like that. I mean, around the country right now, I know of more than 20 groups of people who are working hard to set up a new cooperative. I can see one represented here in this room. And each of these groups is led by what I call a champion, a co-op champion. It's very important to have a co-op champion who's going to make it work, who understands the model and gets the thing off the ground. Now, I've got a question for you, and I really want a show of hands. Now, do cooperatives operate, A, for the common good, or B, for the benefit of the individual members? So, have a think about that. Do cooperatives operate, A, for the common good, or B, for the benefit of the individual members? So, can we have an A, CAs, please? A few hesitants, a few A's. Any B's? Okay, you're both wrong. Sorry. That's right, exactly. Right. That's a trick question. I don't know all the time. It's a trick question. And I'm afraid a lot of cooperatives really do get it wrong. You know, I can tell you some stories, but I shouldn't really. A lot of cooperatives, new co-ops, for example, at the end of the first year, are often people come to say to me, we had a great year last year, it's doing really well, we've made a good amount of money for our members, and we've given it all back to our members. I said, hang on a minute, what happens if next year you want to buy a truck or a computer or a typewriter? Where do you get the money from? So, you know, it's not just for the individuals, but as we know, it's also for the next generation as well, so you have to balance that out. Okay, so thank you for now, let's drill down a bit. Cooperatives are businesses, I said at the start, and businesses need to make a profit. If a business doesn't make a profit, it makes a loss. Someone has to cover that loss, and that will be the members of the co-op. So, a co-op, unlike an investor-owned firm, is profit conscious, not profit maximising. That's quite an important difference in terms of how it operates and how it works in the world and how it relates to its members and to other people. So, a cooperative is in business to provide member needs. However, those members define those needs and their needs, what those needs are. Sometimes I can say if a cooperative makes too much profit, it's embarrassing. And that doesn't happen very often because what generally happens is that they can work themselves a bit better than that. It makes no sense, for example, to charge members highest possible price for something, and then at the end of the year give their members a huge dividend or rebate. So you've got to balance it out. You've got to manage it properly. And when you're in business to supply member needs, you're far more likely to behave in ethical and sustainable ways, and if you're simply maximising the return on investment. I think that's part of the attraction for our community tonight of what a cooperative might be able to do. So cooperatives are democratically controlled business, controlled by those they serve. Now, a lot of people have pointed out to me that there's been a lot of debate among Fonterra farmers about whether they should bring in a new share structure. Isn't it terrible that they can't just agree with each other? And I say, no, that shows democracy in action. Now, whenever we think about the outcome, we know that people have been talking to each other over a long period of time, and that in itself has got to be of value. So co-ops give their members a sense of control they don't otherwise have. There are no investors to feed. Members support their businesses in hard times, so it's lots of reasons why they're more sustainable than investor-owned firms. Now, don't take my word on this. US research has shown that the average life of an ordinary business is 7 years. The average life of a cooperative business, however, is 80 years. Now, that's Professor Michael Cook who's done that research and quoted that recently. So cooperatives come in a number of flavours, and it's important to hold this in mind when we're talking about how a cooperative business can help those who are less well off in the Wellington region. Now, before we look at the different types of cooperative businesses, I want to show you another brief 2-minute video, and this one's...
Hi there, my name is Larissa, and welcome to The Difference Between Banks and Credit Unions, presented by YoungFreeAlberta.com. Part 1, Structure, Profit, and iPods. The differences between banks and credit unions begin with their structure. Credit unions are democratic, kind of like Canada. When you make a deposit, you're buying a membership. Decisions are made by a volunteer board of directors, who are elected by members like you. Because the board is also made up of members, decisions are based on what's best for the people. Yay! Banks don't have members, they have shareholders. Lots of the time the shareholders don't even belong to the bank in question. That's ironic, kind of like the end of Romeo and Juliet. Customers have no say in how the bank is run because a paid board of directors makes all the decisions. And guess what? Decisions are based on what's best for the small group of investors. But wait a second, you say. Just yesterday a bank offered me a free iPod if I start an account with them. That doesn't sound like a decision made solely for the shareholders. You have a lot to learn, young grasshopper. Banks, unlike credit unions, are profit-driven. They entice you with an iPod so that you don't pay much attention to your rates after you open that account. I can't hear you, la 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 la. In credit unions, after expenses are paid and reserves are set aside, surplus earnings are returned to members in tons of different ways. Lower interest rates on loans, higher savings rates, and low-cost or free services, like the Young and Free account. Go to YoungFreeAlberta.com for details. That iPod might look good now, but trust me, it'll be outdated in like 2 weeks. Meanwhile, credit union members will still be reaping the benefits. So, what does it come down to? Hey, do you like my iPod? My bank gave it to me. Hey, do you like my long list of free services? My credit union gave them to me. Owned.
Yes, credit unions overseas are quite different, quite stronger, and that shows you quite nicely. So, financial cooperatives is the first kind. There's about 5 different kinds to talk about. Morris talked about a few of them. The Cooperative Bank, New Zealand's Spring Credit Unions, Rabobank are cooperatives. And as he mentioned, very few financial institutions failed during the global financial crisis. And that's essentially because they take a very conservative view on their work. They're not out to maximise profits for investors, so they don't take risks, which means taking part in the various casinos that some of the other banks were involved in. The second kind of cooperative are what we call consumer-owned co-ops. Here in New Zealand, we think of electricity, Ashburton and Kerry Irrigation. These are our 2 main consumer co-ops. Overseas, think about the co-op supermarkets you find in Europe, and the 300 or more cooperatively owned whole food and organic supermarkets in the USA, which I'd love to see one of those here, because they're great fun. I wander around those in America, thinking, oh, I wish I had a kitchen, but they're beautiful stuff. Now, in terms of work-around cooperatives in New Zealand, we don't have very many. The nearest one to it is Becker, an engineering consulting firm, which I'm not sure of the numbers, but it's a quite significantly large business. In Spain, you've probably heard of Mondragon in the Basque country, again started by a Catholic priest in a very impoverished area, and it's done some very good work at raising the standard of living in that part of Spain. Producer-owned cooperatives, well, you've heard of Fonterra, then there's also Alliance Group, which is a meat co-op, honey producers co-ops, and also co-ops owned by craftspeople. There are a few in New Zealand. If you go to some small town, you'll find a craft store owned by a cooperative of craft persons. And the final part is what they call purchasing and shared services cooperative. I mentioned foodstuffs. There's also farmlands, the fertiliser co-ops, and vehicle repair shops have their own co-op. It's called Capricorn Society. Now, what characterises cooperatives in New Zealand at present is that their members are in the main small businesses, some not so small of course. They're producer co-ops and purchasing and shared service co-ops. Overseas, cooperatives are more likely to be owned by individuals and families, consumer and worker co-ops. That's why there's such a difference between New Zealand and overseas co-ops. Now, to end my bracket, I would like you to imagine, please, what New Zealand would be like without cooperatives. Consider how the spread of incomes would be different from what it is now. I mean, without a doubt, there will be far more exceedingly rich people, less in the middle and more at the lower end. Dairy farmers would be selling their milk to Nestles, or perhaps a similar investor-owned company. They will be price takers and not price makers. Toyota will, as a result, be selling far fewer Hilux utes to their farmers. They'd be driving around in Great Walls. And just as an aside, does anybody know how much profit Fonterra makes? I mean, I don't expect anybody does. Nobody does really. But you've got a good idea what the milk price is. I'm sure many have got a good idea. That's because the amount of profit that a dairy co-op makes is not a relevant figure, so no one really knows it. What they pay their farm members for their milk is the important figure, and that's the one which we always hear discussing in the press. So if you think the spread of wealth is too great now, imagine what it would be like when we didn't have the large spread of co-ops, particularly in rural New Zealand amongst our shopkeepers. Now, again, let's get our imaginations going again. Imagine getting your food from a consumer/worker/grower owned food co-op. And when there's more than one kind of stakeholder, we call these solidarity co-ops. Living in a housing co-op, buying Christmas gifts and birthday gifts from a co-op owned by craftspeople. Being insured through a mutually owned insurance co-op. Seeing the doctor at the local health co-op, and of course banking at the cooperative bank or a credit union. Some of my friends call me a cooperative evangelist. I'm not sure what that means, but I'll just say thank you very much for listening to me. And thank you to Morris for his contribution. And look at our website, www.nz.coop. We're also on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and LinkedIn. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.